The blood-soaked earth beneath Lydia Faraday's feet told the story no one in Clifton, Arizona territory, wanted to hear. The year was 1878, and the stagecoach attack that had left 5 passengers dead and only Lydia alive would soon become the talk of the territory, not for the brutality of the bandits, but for what folks would call her suspicious survival. Lydia stumbled into town just after dawn, her once fine blue traveling dress torn and stained with dirt and blood, hair falling loose from its pins, and eyes vacant with shock. The frontier town of Clifton was just stirring to life when she collapsed at the steps of the general store. The shopkeeper, a stout man with kind eyes named Mr. Peterson, found her there, trembling and incoherent. "Sweet Jesus," he exclaimed, helping her to her feet. "Someone get Doc Winters." Within the hour, Lydia found herself in a small room above the town's only hotel, Dr. Winters examining the gash on her forehead and the bruising on her wrists where she'd been bound. "You're mighty fortunate, Miss Faraday," the doctor said, his gray mustache twitching as he spoke. "Those cuts will heal, though the memories might take longer." Lydia said nothing, staring at the wall, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were white. "Can you tell me what happened?" Sheriff Thomas Burke asked, hat in hand as he stood awkwardly in the doorway. He was a man in his 50s with a weathered face and tired eyes that had seen too much violence on the frontier. Finding her voice at last, Lydia recounted the attack, how the stagecoach had been ambushed 10 miles outside of town by a band of outlaws, how they'd shot the driver and guard without warning, how the passengers, a young married couple, an elderly businessman, and a young man heading west to make his fortune, had been dragged out one by one. "They made us kneel," she whispered. "They took our valuables. Then they shot them. All of them. I was last." Her voice caught. "The leader pointed his gun at my head, and I closed my eyes. Then I heard shouting something about riders approaching. He hit me with his pistol instead. When I woke, they were gone, and everyone else was. The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. "We'll send a party out to recover the bodies and see if we can track these outlaws. You rest now, Miss Faraday." That might have been the end of it, a tragic tale of frontier violence, with one fortunate survivor to tell the story. But Clifton was a small town, and small towns breed suspicion as readily as they do gossip. By the following day, as Lydia slowly regained her strength in the hotel room, the whispers had begun. "Strange, isn't it? Only woman among them, and she's the one who lives. Heard tell those bandits have a pattern, never leave survivors. Not a one. What if she was in on it? Pretty woman like that could be bait for a trap. Or maybe she offered them something in exchange for her life." The innkeeper's wife, Mrs. Hannity, brought these rumors to Lydia along with her midday meal. Not out of malice, but out of what she considered kindness, a warning. "People are talking, Miss Faraday," she said, setting down a tray of stew and cornbread. "Might be best if you moved on once you're well enough. Stage comes through again in 2 days." Lydia stared at the woman in disbelief. "Move on? I have nowhere to go. I was traveling to meet my uncle in Prescott. He's my only living relative, and he doesn't even know about the attack." Mrs. Hannity patted her hand with false sympathy. "Sometimes it's easier to make a fresh start somewhere folks don't know your story." The rumors spread like wildfire. By evening, Sheriff Burke returned, his expression grim. "Miss Faraday, I need to ask you some additional questions. Some inconsistencies have arisen." "Inconsistencies?" Lydia sat up straighter on the bed. "The manner of the attack doesn't match the usual methods of the bandits in this region. And we found something peculiar." He pulled a small pouch from his vest pocket. "This was discovered under the driver's seat. Contains about $50 in gold coins. Outlaws don't typically leave money behind." Lydia shook her head. "I don't understand what you're suggesting." "I'm not suggesting anything, miss. Just doing my duty to investigate all angles." But his tone said otherwise, as did the glances from townspeople when she ventured downstairs for dinner that evening. Women pulled their children closer as she passed. Men stared openly, some with suspicion, others with something that made her skin crawl. By the 3rd day in Clifton, the accusations had become more direct. A woman at the general store refused to stand in line with her. The server at the cafe accidentally spilled coffee in her lap. Someone scratched the word harlot on her hotel room door. It was on this day that Isaac Xavier rode into town. He came from the north, astride a sturdy buckskin gelding, his tall frame casting a long shadow in the late afternoon sun. Dust from the trail covered his denim trousers and once blue shirt. A battered brown hat shaded eyes the color of a summer storm. At his hip hung a Colt revolver, worn but well-maintained, like everything else about him. Isaac had been driving a small herd of cattle to sell in Tucson when he'd heard about the stagecoach attack. News traveled fast on the frontier, even if it was seldom accurate. He'd changed course for Clifton, drawn by the descriptions of the outlaws. They sounded like the same men who had raided his family's ranch 5 years prior, killing his father and younger brother. His first stop was the sheriff's office, where Burke was less than welcoming. Another one curious about the stagecoach. The lawman said, barely looking up from his paperwork. Seems to be drawing all sorts of attention. I have reason to believe the men responsible might be the Scanlon gang, Isaac replied, leaning against the doorframe. I've been tracking them for some time. That got the sheriff's attention. Scanlons have been quiet for months. What makes you think it was them? 3 men, one with a distinctive scar across his throat that makes his voice sound like gravel. They don't just rob, they make a show of executing their victims. And they always hit stagecoaches carrying wealthy passengers. The sheriff frowned. That does sound like what the survivor described. Survivor? Isaac hadn't heard this detail. Young woman. Only one who made it. Though folks around here are wondering how that came to be. Burke's tone implied he shared those doubts. Isaac's interest was piqued. I'd like to speak with her. She's staying at the hotel. Name's Lydia Faraday. Though I warn you, she might not be the most reliable witness. Isaac found her sitting alone on the hotel's small back porch, staring out at nothing in particular. Even in her simple calico dress, hair pulled back in a loose braid, with dark circles under her eyes from sleepless nights, he could see she was beautiful. But it was the dignified way she held herself, despite being clearly broken inside, that caught his attention. Miss Faraday, he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, wariness immediately filling her eyes. Yes, my name is Isaac Xavier. I understand you survived the stagecoach attack. He removed his hat, holding it respectfully. I'd like to ask you about the men responsible, if you wouldn't mind. Are you with the law? Her voice was stronger than he expected, given what she'd been through. No, madam. I have personal reasons for hunting these men. After a moment's hesitation, he added, they killed my family some years back. Something in Lydia's expression changed recognition of a shared pain, perhaps. She gestured to the chair beside her. Then you're the first person in this town who might actually believe me. Isaac sat, placing his hat on his knee. Why wouldn't people believe you? Because I lived, she said simply. Apparently. That makes me either a collaborator or a woman of loose virtue who traded my body for my life. Isaac's jaw tightened. That's a cruel assumption. This can be a cruel place. She looked out at the mountains in the distance. I've been asked to leave town as soon as I'm able. The problem is, I have nowhere to go. My uncle in Prescott doesn't know I'm coming. I had money for a hotel, but it was stolen in the attack. These outlaws, Isaac redirected gently. Can you describe them? For the next hour, Lydia recounted every detail she could remember, their appearances, their voices, the words they'd spoken, the way they'd moved. Isaac listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification, but never once questioning the truth of her account. That's them, he confirmed when she finished. The Scanlon brothers and their cousin. They've been terrorizing stages and remote settlements from New Mexico to California for years. The sheriff doesn't seem convinced they're even real, Lydia said bitterly. Burke has a comfortable position here. He doesn't want trouble with dangerous outlaws. Isaac stood, settling his hat back on his head. I'll be heading out tomorrow to track them. Panic flashed in Lydia's eyes. You're leaving? I have to. These men need to answer for what they've done. He paused, studying her face. Miss Faraday, what they're saying about you, it's wrong. Surviving doesn't make you guilty. It makes you brave. His words struck something deep within her, a chord that had been silent since the attack. For the first time in days, she felt something other than fear and shame. Thank you, Mr. Xavier, she said softly. He tipped his hat and turned to go, but something made him stop. The stage won't be through for another 3 days. If you'd like, I could escort you to Prescott after I deal with the Scanlons. It's on my way north. The offer surprised them both. Isaac wasn't in the habit of escorting young women across the territory. But something about Lydia Faraday, her quiet strength, the injustice of her situation, perhaps even the way her green eyes seemed to clear when he spoke kindly to her, made him want to help. "I couldn't ask that of you," she replied, though hope flickered in her expression. "You didn't ask. I offered." He smiled slightly. "Think about it. I'll be back in town within the week if all goes well." With that, he left, unaware that their conversation had been observed by several townspeople, including Mrs. Hannity, whose eyes narrowed with suspicion. That evening, as Lydia ate another solitary meal in the hotel dining room, enduring the stares and whispers, the door swung open to admit Sheriff Burke and two other men she didn't recognize. "Miss Faraday," Burke said, removing his hat. "This is Mr. Clancy from the stage company and Mr. Devereaux, who was partner to one of the men killed in the attack." Lydia set down her fork, her appetite vanishing. "Gentlemen, we've come about the matter of your testimony," Clancy said, a thin man with spectacles and an officious manner. "There are concerns." "What concerns?" Lydia asked, though she already knew. "The stage was carrying a considerable sum in its strongbox," Devereaux stated, his voice cold. "Money that wasn't recovered at the scene." "I told the sheriff everything I saw," Lydia replied. "The outlaws took a metal box from under the driver's seat. And yet you were spared when everyone else was murdered," Clancy pressed. "It seems convenient." Lydia's hands began to tremble. "There was nothing convenient about watching 5 people executed before my eyes, sir." "We're not accusing you of anything," Burke interjected, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But we need to be thorough. Mr. Xavier arrived today, asking questions about the same outlaws. Do you know him?" "I only met him today." "Really?" "He seemed quite interested in helping you." Burke leaned forward. "Are you certain you haven't encountered him before? Perhaps planning something together?" Anger flared through Lydia's fear. "Are you suggesting that I collaborated with outlaws to rob the stage, or that I'm now collaborating with Mr. Xavier for some nefarious purpose? Either way, you're wrong. We're simply investigating all possibilities," Burke said smoothly. "Then investigate this possibility, Sheriff," Lydia said, rising from her chair. "I am exactly what I claim to be, a woman who witnessed a horrific crime and survived by sheer chance. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've lost my appetite." She left the dining room with as much dignity as she could muster, feeling their eyes on her back. Once in her room, she locked the door and allowed herself to cry for the first time since the attack. The tears came violently, shaking her entire body as she muffled her sobs in her pillow. When they finally subsided, Lydia sat up and wiped her face. Her mind turned to Isaac Xavier and his unexpected offer of assistance. She'd sensed no deception in him, only a determination that matched the pain in his eyes when he spoke of his lost family. "Surviving doesn't make you guilty. It makes you brave." His words returned to her, a balm to her wounded spirit. She'd been feeling guilty not for any wrongdoing, but for being alive when others weren't. For the first time, she considered that surviving might require its own kind of courage. With that thought, she made a decision. She wouldn't wait for Isaac to return. She would leave Clifton at first light. Dawn was just breaking when Lydia slipped from the hotel, carrying her small carpet bag with the few possessions she'd managed to save from the attack. She'd left payment for her room on the dresser, though it took nearly all the money she'd kept hidden in her boot, the emergency funds her aunt had insisted she carry, separate from her main purse. Her plan was simple: walk to the livery stable, hire a horse or mule, and make her way to the next town where hopefully she could send a telegram to her uncle. It wasn't a good plan, but it was better than enduring another day of Clifton's growing hostility. She was halfway to the livery when a voice called out behind her. "Miss Faraday, where do you think you're going?" She turned to see Mrs. Hannity hurrying down the street, still in her nightclothes with a shawl hastily thrown over her shoulders. "I'm leaving, Mrs. Hannity." "Isn't that what everyone wants?" "Not before settling your bill," the woman said, coming to a stop before her. "I left money in my room, not enough for the damage to my reputation. Having a woman of questionable character staying under my roof has cost me customers." Lydia stiffened. "I am not of questionable character, and I've done nothing to damage your reputation." "That's not what folks are saying," Mrs. Hannity sneered. "Especially after your private meeting with that stranger yesterday. Quite cozy you two seemed." We were discussing the outlaws who attacked the stage, Lydia said through gritted teeth. Nothing improper occurred. That's not how I'll tell it if you leave without proper compensation, the innkeeper's wife threatened. $15 should cover it. It was an outrageous sum, and they both knew Lydia couldn't pay it. Before she could respond, another voice joined the conversation. Is there a problem here, ladies? They turned to see a tall man approaching Nathaniel Grant, the town banker. He was in his 40s, well-dressed even at this early hour, with a neatly trimmed beard and calculating eyes. Mr. Grant. Mrs. Hannity immediately adopted a more pleasant tone. No problem at all. Just settling accounts with Miss Faraday before she departs. Ah, the young lady from the stagecoach incident. His gaze swept over Lydia in a way that made her want to pull her shawl tighter. I've heard quite a bit about you. All lies, I assure you, Lydia said coldly. Grant smiled. Perhaps, perhaps not. Either way, I might have a solution to your current difficulty. He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a roll of bills. Allow me to settle your debt with Mrs. Hannity. That's very kind, but Lydia began. $15, was it? He counted out the bills and handed them to the innkeeper's wife, who took them eagerly. There. Now, Miss Faraday, perhaps you'd join me for breakfast? We can discuss your situation. Alarm bells rang in Lydia's mind. Grant's assistance came with strings attached. She could see it in his eyes. Thank you for your help, Mr. Grant, but I really must be on my way. His smile tightened. I insist. It's not safe for a young woman to travel alone, especially one who's had such misfortune already. The implied threat was clear. Lydia took a step back, bumping into Mrs. Hannity, who grabbed her arm. Don't be rude, girl, the woman hissed. Mr. Grant is a respected man in this town. Let go of me, Lydia demanded, trying to pull free. Is that any way to show gratitude? Grant moved closer, reaching for her other arm. The lady said to let her go. The new voice was quiet but carried an unmistakable edge of danger. Isaac Xavier stood a few yards away, his hand resting casually near his holstered revolver. His clothes were dust-covered and his face bore the stubble of days on the trail, but his eyes were clear and focused. Grant released Lydia immediately. Xavier, thought you'd left town. Came back sooner than expected. Isaac's gaze shifted to Mrs. Hannity, who quickly dropped Lydia's arm. Seems I arrived at a good time. We were just helping Miss Faraday, Grant said smoothly. She was attempting to leave town without settling her debts. Is that so? Isaac looked to Lydia. I left payment in my room, she said. Mrs. Hannity was demanding additional compensation for supposed damage to her reputation. Isaac's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. That's an interesting business model. He turned back to Grant. As you've so generously covered her expenses, I believe the matter is settled. Miss Faraday will be coming with me now. With you? Grant's eyes narrowed. And where might you be taking her? That's between Miss Faraday and myself. Isaac extended his hand to Lydia. Madam. Without hesitation, Lydia moved to his side, relief flooding through her. Thank you, Mr. Xavier. This isn't over, Grant warned, his genial facade falling away. Sheriff Burke will hear about this. I'm counting on it, Isaac replied evenly. I have some questions for him myself. He placed a protective hand on Lydia's back, guiding her away. Let's go. They walked in silence until they reached the livery stable, where Isaac's buckskin was already saddled alongside a sturdy brown mare. You came back early, Lydia said, finally finding her voice. Did you find the Scanlons? Isaac's expression darkened. No, but I found something else that concerned me enough to return. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded newspaper. This was in the next town over. Seems your story has traveled. Lydia unfolded the paper to find a sensationalized account of the stagecoach attack, complete with insinuations about her character and suggestions that she might have been involved. It was even worse than the whispers in Clifton. How did they publish this so quickly? She asked, her hands trembling. The Telegraph makes gossip travel fast. Isaac took the paper back. I was worried about what might happen if these rumors continued to spread, so I came back. Just in time, it seems. Lydia glanced toward the street, where a small crowd was beginning to gather, no doubt alerted by Mrs. Hannity. What now? Now we leave, before Grant returns with the sheriff. Isaac checked the cinch on the mare's saddle. This is Penny. She's gentle, but sure-footed. Can you ride? Yes, my father taught me. Lydia hesitated. But where are we going? You didn't find the outlaws. First, we get you somewhere safe. Then I continue hunting. He helped her mount the mare. There's a place about a day's ride from here, ranch belonging to an old friend. You'll be welcome there while I finish what I started. Lydia wanted to protest, to insist on continuing to Prescott as originally planned, but the sight of Sheriff Burke and Nathan Grant hurrying toward the livery changed her mind. She nodded, and Isaac swung into his own saddle. They rode out the back way, avoiding the main street, and were soon on the trail heading west. Lydia expected pursuit, but none came. Perhaps Burke wasn't as convinced of her guilt as he pretended, or perhaps he simply didn't care enough to chase her beyond the town limits. They rode hard for several hours before stopping to rest the horses near a small stream. Lydia dismounted stiffly, her muscles unused to riding after days of inactivity. Isaac offered her his canteen, which she accepted gratefully. You still haven't told me why you came back, she said after drinking. Not the full reason, anyway. Isaac crouched by the stream, refilling his own canteen. Those newspaper accounts worried me. But there was something else. He stood, meeting her eyes. The more I thought about what you told me, the more something didn't add up. Lydia tensed. What do you mean? The Scanlon gang has a pattern. They're brutal, but they're also efficient. They don't leave loose ends. He studied her face carefully. Yet they left you alive. They were interrupted, she reminded him. They heard riders approaching. So they said, but the Scanlons wouldn't run from just any riders. They're not easily spooked. Isaac leaned against a boulder. I think something else happened out there. Lydia turned away, her heart racing. I told you everything I remember. Did you? His voice was gentle, not accusatory. Because I've been tracking these men for 5 years, and I know how they operate. They wouldn't have left you, conscious or otherwise, unless they had a very good reason. What are you suggesting? Lydia asked, her back still to him. I'm suggesting that maybe there's more to your story than you've shared. Not because you're lying, but because sometimes our minds protect us from things too painful to remember. Lydia closed her eyes, fragments of memory flashing behind her eyelids, the leader's face close to hers, his breath hot on her cheek, words whispered that she couldn't quite recall. The cold metal of a gun barrel against her temple. And something else. A name. He knew me, she whispered, the realization breaking through whatever barrier her mind had erected. The leader, he called me by name before they left. Isaac straightened. He knew you? How? I don't know. But he said. She struggled to recall the exact words. Tell your uncle we're coming for him next, Lydia Faraday. She turned to face Isaac, her eyes wide with fear. My uncle in Prescott, I was traveling to live with him after my aunt died. But I've never met him. How would these outlaws know who I am or where I was going? Isaac's expression grew grave. Who is your uncle? Judge William Faraday. He's a circuit judge for the territory. Understanding dawned on Isaac's face. That explains it. Judge Faraday sentenced the youngest Scanlon brother to hang 3 years ago. This wasn't random. They attacked that stage knowing you'd be on it. They left you alive to deliver a message. The implications hit Lydia like a physical blow. Those people died because of me? Because I'm related to a judge? No, Isaac said firmly, crossing to her. They died because the Scanlons are murderers. None of this is your fault. But Lydia wasn't listening. Her mind raced through the events at Clifton with new understanding. The sheriff, do you think he knows about the connection? Is that why he was so suspicious of me? Isaac considered this. It's possible. Or he might have other reasons for wanting to discredit your account. Like what? Like being on the Scanlons' payroll. Isaac's jaw tightened. It wouldn't be the first time a lawman looked the other way for the right price. Lydia sank onto a rock, overwhelmed by these revelations. What do we do now? If they're targeting my uncle, I need to warn him. That's exactly what they want, for you to lead them straight to him. Isaac shook his head. We need to be smarter than that. First, we get you somewhere safe. Then we find a way to get a message to your uncle without exposing either of you to danger. And then I find the Scanlons and end this. The cold determination in his voice sent a shiver through Lydia. You can't face them alone, she protested. There are at least 3 of them. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I've been preparing for this confrontation for 5 years, Miss Faraday. I don't plan to lose. They resumed their journey shortly after, riding at a more measured pace to spare the horses. Lydia found herself studying Isaac as they traveled the straight line of his back, the watchful way his eyes scanned the horizon, the gentle manner in which he handled his mount. He was a contradiction, soft-spoken yet dangerous, kind yet unyielding in his purpose. "How did you become a bounty hunter?" she asked as they rode side by side along a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of desert and distant mountains. "I'm not officially a bounty hunter," he corrected. "I have a small ranch up north. But after what happened to my family, I couldn't just go back to raising cattle and pretend justice would find the Scanlons on its own." "You said they killed your father and brother?" Isaac nodded, his expression tightening. "My pa had a decent spread near the New Mexico border. We weren't rich, but we were doing all right. The Scanlons came through, looking for easy pickings. Pa tried to stand up to them." His voice grew distant. "My brother Joey was just 16. He shouldn't have been involved, but he idolized Pa, tried to help him fight them off." "And you?" Lydia asked softly. "I was in town, selling some horses. By the time I got back." He trailed off, then cleared his throat. "Been tracking them ever since, between working odd jobs to keep myself fed." "I'm sorry," Lydia said, understanding now the depth of his determination. "It was 5 years ago. Time doesn't always heal such wounds." Isaac glanced at her, surprised by her insight. "No, it doesn't. What about you? You mentioned an aunt who passed." "My parents died of fever when I was 14. My aunt raised me after that, but she had consumption. The doctors said the dry air out west might help, so we moved to Santa Fe last year." Lydia's voice softened. "It didn't help. She died 3 weeks ago. My uncle in Prescott is my only living relative." "Seems we both know something about loss," Isaac observed. "Yes." Lydia straightened in her saddle. "But also about surviving." Isaac's eyes met hers, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. For a moment, Lydia forgot the danger they were in, aware only of the connection forming between them. The moment was broken by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Isaac reined in sharply, his hand moving to his revolver. "Get behind those rocks," he ordered, pointing to a cluster of boulders just off the trail. "And stay down." Lydia didn't argue, guiding her mare into the shelter of the rocks and dismounting quickly. Isaac followed, his movements silent and practiced. They crouched together, watching the trail they'd just traveled. For riders appeared, moving at a steady pace. Even from a distance, Lydia could make out Sheriff Burke's distinctive hat and the banker Grant's well-tailored jacket. The other two were deputies from Clifton. "They're following us after all," she whispered. "Not for long," Isaac murmured. "There's a fork in the trail about a mile ahead. We'll double back through the wash and take the western path. They'll expect us to head north toward Prescott." His confidence was reassuring. When the riders had passed out of sight, they remounted and followed Isaac's plan, descending into a dry riverbed that would hide their tracks before cutting west. By nightfall, they were miles from their pursuers, camped in a small canyon that offered both water and protection. Isaac built a small fire, just enough to cook the rabbit he'd shot earlier and to ward off the desert's nighttime chill. Lydia sat across from him, the flickering light illuminating her face in a way that made Isaac aware of how beautiful she was, despite the ordeal she'd endured. "We should reach my friend's ranch by tomorrow afternoon," he said, breaking a silence that had grown too comfortable. "You'll be safe there while I take care of the Scanlons. And if Burke and the others come looking, Sarah and Marcus will protect you. They owe me a few favors." He offered her a plate of rabbit and hardtack. "Besides, Burke won't expect us to stop so close to Clifton. He'll think we're making for the territory line." Lydia accepted the food gratefully. "You seem very certain of how others will behave. Reading people keeps you alive out here." Isaac took a bite of his own meal. "Like how I knew you were innocent the moment I met you." "Did you?" She raised an eyebrow. "Or were you just being kind to a woman in distress?" "Both, maybe." He smiled slightly. "But I've met enough liars and cheats to recognize honesty when I see it." "Your eyes tell the truth, even when you're trying not to." Lydia looked away, uncomfortable with how easily he seemed to read her. "And what truth are my eyes telling now?" "That you're scared, but also stronger than you realize." Isaac set down his plate. "You'll get through this, Miss Faraday." "Lydia," she corrected softly. "After everything that's happened, I think you can call me Lydia." "Lydia," he repeated, as if testing how the name felt on his tongue. "Then I'm Isaac." They finished their meal in companionable silence. Afterward, Isaac insisted Lydia take the only bedroll while he kept watch. Despite her protests, exhaustion won out, and she was asleep within minutes of lying down, the day's long ride and emotional revelations taking their toll. Isaac sat by the fire, his revolver across his lap, watching Lydia's peaceful face in the dying light. Something protective stirred within him, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He'd started this journey seeking vengeance, but now found himself equally determined to ensure Lydia's safety. It was a complication he hadn't anticipated. The next morning dawned clear and cool. They broke camp quickly, erasing all signs of their presence before continuing westward. The landscape grew more varied as they rode, desert giving way to rolling hills dotted with juniper and pine. By mid-afternoon, they crested a rise to see a modest ranch nestled in a green valley below a main house, barn, corral, and several outbuildings, all well-maintained. Smoke rose from the chimney, and cattle grazed in nearby pastures. "The Circle M," Isaac announced. "Marcus Mitchell's place. He was my father's best friend." As they approached, a man emerged from the barn, tall and broad-shouldered, with graying hair and a weathered face that broke into a smile when he recognized Isaac. Behind him came a woman in her 40s, wiping her hands on an apron. "Isaac Xavier, as I live and breathe," Marcus called, striding forward to meet them. "Sarah, look who's finally remembered we exist." Isaac dismounted, clasping the older man's hand warmly before accepting a hug from Sarah. "Good to see you both." "And who's this lovely lady?" Sarah asked, turning her attention to Lydia. "This is Miss Lydia Faraday," Isaac said as he helped Lydia down from her mare. "She's in some trouble, and I was hoping you might offer her shelter for a short while." Sarah immediately took Lydia's arm. "Any friend of Isaac's is welcome here. You look exhausted, poor thing. Come inside, and I'll fix you something to eat while you tell us what's happened." Over coffee and freshly baked bread, Isaac explained the situation: the stagecoach attack, the Scanlons' involvement, and the threat to Judge Faraday. He omitted the details of how Clifton had treated Lydia, but she could tell by Sarah's sympathetic glances that the woman understood there was more to the story. "Of course she can stay," Marcus said when Isaac finished. "We've got plenty of room, and no one will find her here." "I hate to impose," Lydia began, but Sarah cut her off with a wave. "Nonsense. It'll be nice having another woman around. These men work me to the bone," she teased, patting her husband's hand affectionately. "I won't be gone long," Isaac promised. "A week, maybe 2. Just long enough to find the Scanlons and send word to Judge Faraday." "And then what?" Marcus asked, his expression serious. "You planning to take on all 3 Scanlons yourself?" "If necessary." Marcus exchanged a look with his wife. "Isaac, you've been chasing these men for 5 years. Maybe it's time to let the law handle it." "The law?" Isaac scoffed. "Like Sheriff Burke, who's probably in their pocket. Or the territorial marshals, who haven't managed to catch them in all this time." "He's right, Marcus," Sarah said quietly. "You know what those men did to his family. And now they're threatening this poor girl's uncle. Someone has to stop them." Marcus sighed heavily. "At least take some time to rest before you go. One day won't make a difference." Isaac hesitated, glancing at Lydia. The weariness in her eyes made the decision for him. "All right, one day." That evening, after a hearty dinner, Sarah showed Lydia to a comfortable bedroom at the end of the hall. "There are fresh linens in the chest, and I've left a nightgown and some clothes that should fit you. My daughter's about your size. She's married now, living over in Flagstaff." "You're very kind," Lydia said, genuinely touched by the woman's hospitality. "It's nothing." Sarah hesitated at the door. "Whatever happened to you before Isaac found you, it doesn't matter here. You're safe now." After Sarah left, Lydia sat on the edge of the bed, overcome by a sense of relief so profound it brought tears to her eyes. For the first time since the stagecoach attack, she felt truly safe. She went to the window, gazing out at the ranch yard bathed in moonlight. Isaac stood by the corral, talking with Marcus, his profile outlined against the night sky. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, their eyes meeting across the distance. Lydia didn't look away. Neither did he. The next day passed in a blur of domestic activity. Sarah enlisted Lydia's help with bread making and mending, tasks that felt wonderfully normal after the chaos of recent days. Isaac and Marcus rode out early to check on the cattle, returning mid-afternoon covered in dust but in good spirits. That evening, after dinner, Isaac found Lydia sitting on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. "May I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the empty space beside her on the bench. Of course. He sat, his shoulder nearly touching hers. For a while, they simply watched the sunset in companionable silence. "I'll be leaving at first light," Isaac finally said. Lydia nodded, having expected this. "Where will you go?" "There's a town about 40 miles south of here, Dryden. The Scanlons have connections there. It's a good place to pick up their trail. And once you find them," Isaac's expression hardened, "I'll do what needs doing." "You mean kill them?" It wasn't a question. "They murdered my family, Lydia. They killed those people on the stagecoach. They won't stop until someone stops them." She turned to face him directly. "And what if they kill you instead?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. Isaac hadn't considered failure, or rather, he hadn't allowed himself to consider it. But the concern in Lydia's eyes made him confront the possibility. "I've been preparing for this confrontation for a long time," he said softly. "I'm ready. Ready to die for revenge?" Lydia shook her head. "That seems a terrible waste. Not revenge. Justice. Is there a difference?" Isaac considered this. Revenge is personal. Justice is broader. It protects others from suffering the same fate. And is that truly why you're hunting them? To protect others? Lydia's gaze was penetrating. Or is it because you can't move forward until you've settled the past? Her insight startled him. No one had questioned his motivations so directly before, not even Marcus, who had known him since childhood. "Maybe both," he admitted. "Does that make me a hypocrite?" "No." Lydia smiled sadly. "It makes you human." She touched his hand lightly. "Just promise me you'll be careful." She hesitated. "I'd like to know you'll come back safely." The simple admission warmed something in Isaac's chest. "I promise." Later that night, unable to sleep, Isaac sat at the small desk in his room, writing by lamplight. The letter was addressed to Judge William Faraday in Prescott, explaining the situation and advising him to seek protection. He made no mention of Lydia's whereabouts, only that she was safe. Better that the judge didn't know, in case the letter was intercepted. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Lydia standing there in a borrowed nightgown and robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. "I saw the light under your door," she explained. "I couldn't sleep." "Neither could I." Isaac stepped back, allowing her to enter. "I'm writing to your uncle." Lydia crossed to the desk, reading over the letter. "You're not telling him where I am. Safer that way." She nodded, understanding the precaution. "Will you post it from Dryden?" "No, there's a way station about halfway there. I'll send it from there." Isaac reclaimed his seat at the desk. "That way, even if someone sees me mailing it, they won't connect it to where I'm headed next." Lydia wandered to the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday about surviving making me brave. It's true. I didn't feel brave in Clifton. I felt ashamed, as if I should have died alongside the others, or found some way to save them." She turned to face him. "How do you live with being the one who wasn't there when your family needed you?" Isaac's breath caught at how precisely she'd identified the guilt that had haunted him for years. "Not well some days. I keep thinking about the couple on the stagecoach," Lydia continued. "They were newlyweds, traveling to meet his family. When the outlaws pulled us out, he tried to shield her with his body. They shot him first, then her while she was still screaming his name." Her voice broke. "How is it fair that I'm alive and they're not?" Isaac rose from his chair and crossed to her, drawn by the pain in her voice. "It's not fair. None of it is." He took her hands in his. "But you survived for a reason, Lydia. Maybe to ensure the Scanlons finally face justice. Maybe for something else entirely that you don't yet know." Tears filled her eyes. "What if I'm not strong enough for whatever that reason is?" "You are." Without thinking, Isaac reached up to brush a tear from her cheek. "I've seen it from the moment I met you. You endured the attack. You endured Clifton's cruelty. You're still standing, still fighting." Lydia leaned slightly into his touch, her eyes meeting his. Something shifted between them, the concern of allies becoming something deeper, more personal. "Isaac," she whispered, his name a question and an answer all at once. He knew he should step back, maintained the distance that propriety and their circumstances demanded. But the warmth of her skin beneath his fingers and the trust in her eyes drew him closer instead. The kiss was gentle, tentative at first, as if both were afraid the other might pull away. When neither did, it deepened, becoming something urgent and necessary. Lydia's hands moved to Isaac's shoulders, while his slid around her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily. Isaac rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed. "I shouldn't have done that," he murmured. "I'm glad you did." Lydia's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "I've felt so alone since the attack. You make me feel found." The simple honesty of her words broke through the last of Isaac's reservations. He kissed her again, longer this time, pouring into it all the emotions he couldn't yet name. It was Lydia who eventually stepped back, though she kept hold of his hands. "You're leaving tomorrow." "Yes." "Then we should say goodnight." She squeezed his hands once before releasing them. "Be careful, Isaac. Come back." "I will," he promised, meaning it more deeply than he'd ever meant anything. After she left, Isaac returned to the desk and added a postscript to his letter, requesting that Judge Faraday contact Marcus Mitchell for news of his niece. He sealed the envelope, his mind still filled with the feel of Lydia's lips on his and the weight of her trust. For the first time in 5 years, Isaac had something to live for beyond vengeance. It terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. Dawn came too quickly. Isaac was already in the barn, saddling his buckskin, when Lydia appeared. She dressed in one of Sarah's daughter's riding outfits, a practical split skirt and blouse that suited her far better than the torn traveling dress she'd arrived in. "I wanted to see you off," she said, leaning against the stall door. Isaac tightened the cinch, checking that everything was secure. "I thought you might still be sleeping." "How could I sleep?" She smiled faintly. "Besides, Sarah's been up since before dawn, making you enough food for 3 men. As if summoned by her name, Sarah appeared with a bundle wrapped in cloth. "Provisions," she announced, handing it to Isaac. "And don't you dare refuse. You're too skinny as it is." Isaac accepted the package with a chuckle. "Yes, madam." Marcus joined them, carrying Isaac's rifle in its scabbard. "Weather's clear. Should be good riding." He helped attach the scabbard to the saddle. "Remember what I said about Dryden? Town's changed since you were last there. New sheriff who actually enforces the law, for one thing." "I'll be careful," Isaac promised. After securing the last of his gear, he turned to Lydia. They'd already said the most important things the night before, but leaving her now felt harder than he'd anticipated. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he said. Lydia nodded, her composure admirable despite the worry in her eyes. "I know." Marcus and Sarah tactfully moved away, giving them a moment of privacy. "Lydia, about last night," Isaac began. "Don't apologize," she interrupted. "Not unless you regret it." "I don't," he assured her quickly. "But the timing is complicated. Life is complicated." She smiled wryly. "Especially ours, it seems." Isaac reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "When I return, when this is over, we'll have time to figure out what this is between us. If that's what you want." "It is." She squeezed his hand. "Now go, before I ask you to stay." With a final nod to Marcus and Sarah, Isaac mounted his horse and rode out, forcing himself not to look back until he reached the top of the rise. When he did, Lydia was still standing in the yard, watching him go. He raised his hand in farewell, then turned and continued on his journey, more determined than ever to end the threat of the Scanlons quickly and return to her. The days that followed settled into a routine for Lydia. She helped Sarah with the household chores, learned about the running of the ranch from Marcus, and spent her evenings reading books from the small, but well-curated library in the main house. The Mitchells were kind and asked few questions, accepting her presence as if she'd always been there. A week passed with no word from Isaac. Then 2. Lydia tried not to worry, telling herself that tracking outlaws across the territory would naturally take time. But each day that passed without news made sleep more elusive and anxiety more constant. On the 17th day, a rider approached the ranch, not Isaac, but a young man Lydia didn't recognize. Marcus met him in the yard, spoke with him briefly, then came to find Lydia in the kitchen where she was helping Sarah preserve peaches. "There's news," he said, his expression grave. "From Dryden." Lydia's heart stopped. "Isaac, He's alive, Marcus assured her quickly. But there was trouble. The Scanlons ambushed him. He was shot. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. How badly? Lydia asked, forcing the words past the tightness in her throat. Bad enough that he couldn't travel, but not life-threatening, according to the message. He's being treated by the doctor in Dryden. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. I'm going to ride down there, bring him back. I'm coming with you, Lydia said immediately. Marcus and Sarah exchanged a look. It's not safe, Sarah began. If the Scanlons are still in the area, I don't care. Lydia's voice was firm. Isaac was injured helping me. I can't just wait here wondering if he's all right. The girl's right, Sarah, Marcus said after a moment. Besides, having a woman along might help with his care on the journey back. He turned to Lydia. We'll leave at first light. Pack only what you need, it's a hard 2-day ride. That night, Lydia barely slept, her mind filled with images of Isaac wounded and alone in a strange town. When she did drift off, her dreams were filled with gunfire and blood, causing her to wake in a cold sweat more than once. They departed before dawn, riding hard through the morning. Marcus was a quiet companion, focused on making good time rather than conversation, which suited Lydia's mood. By dusk, they'd covered more than half the distance to Dryden, making camp in a sheltered hollow near a small stream. As they sat by the fire, eating a simple meal of beans and hardtack, Marcus finally broke his silence. Isaac cares for you. Lydia looked up, surprised by the directness of the statement. I care for him too. I've known that boy since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. Never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Marcus poked at the fire with a stick. Not even before what happened to his family. What was he like? Before, I mean. Marcus smiled, lost in memory for a moment. Lighter, quick to laugh. Had plans to expand his father's ranch, maybe start one of his own someday. Always had a knack with horses, gentlest hand I've ever seen. His smile faded. The Scanlons took more than his family that day. They took his future as he saw it. And now I think he might have found a new one. Marcus met her eyes across the fire. If he lives long enough to recognize it. The implication was clear. You think he's being reckless? I think he's been running toward his death for 5 years. Might be he finally has a reason to run the other way. But old habits are hard to break. Marcus set down his plate. He'll need something to live for, beyond vengeance. Or someone, Lydia said softly. Or someone, Marcus agreed, nodding. They reached Dryden by mid-afternoon the next day, a dusty mining town larger than Clifton, but with the same frontier roughness. Marcus led them directly to the doctor's office, a small building on the main street with a weathered sign proclaiming Dr. J. Rollins, physician and surgeon. The doctor himself answered their knock, a thin man with spectacles and a perpetually worried expression. Mr. Mitchell? Figured you'd be showing up soon. He's in the back room. Lydia followed Marcus through a small waiting area to a room containing a single bed. Isaac lay there, pale and still, his torso wrapped in bandages. One arm was also bandaged and held immobile against his chest. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow but steady. How is he? Marcus asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Stable now. Took 2 bullets, one in the shoulder, one that grazed his ribs. Lost a fair amount of blood, and there was some infection, but the fever broke yesterday. Dr. Rollins adjusted his spectacles. He's a lucky man. An inch to the left, and that shoulder wound would have been fatal. Lydia moved to the bedside, gently taking Isaac's uninjured hand in hers. His skin was cool, but not cold, his pulse steady beneath her fingertips. When can he be moved? I prefer to keep him here another week, the doctor said. But I understand that might not be prudent. The men who did this are still at large. What happened? Marcus asked. His message didn't say much. Dr. Rollins sighed. From what I understand, he tracked the Scanlon gang to a saloon on the edge of town. There was an altercation. Shots were fired. The sheriff arrived too late to catch the Scanlons, but in time to bring your friend here. Is he conscious at all? Lydia asked, still holding Isaac's hand. Comes and goes. More lucid today than yesterday. The doctor patted her shoulder kindly. Talk to him. It might help bring him around. After the doctor left, Marcus took a seat by the window, keeping watch on the street outside, while Lydia pulled a chair to Isaac's bedside. Isaac, she said softly, squeezing his hand. It's Lydia. I'm here. Marcus too. We've come to take you home. For several long moments, there was no response. Then his fingers twitched in hers, and his eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then clearing as they found her face. Lydia. His voice was hoarse, barely audible. You shouldn't be here. Not safe. Neither should you, she countered, relief making her voice sharper than intended. You were supposed to be careful, remember? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Never was good at keeping promises. Marcus approached the bed, laying a hand on Isaac's good shoulder. You gave us quite a scare, son. Sorry, Isaac murmured. The Scanlons can wait, Marcus said firmly. First, we get you well. No. Isaac tried to sit up, wincing in pain. They know about Lydia now? Asked about her before they shot me. Alarm raced through Lydia. How could they know about me? Grant. Isaac grimaced. Nathan Grant from Clifton. He's connected to them somehow. Saw him talking to the youngest Scanlon before they spotted me. Marcus and Lydia exchanged worried glances. Then we need to move quickly, Marcus decided. Can you travel, Isaac? Even by wagon. If it means keeping Lydia safe, I can travel, Isaac replied, determination evident despite his weakness. Dr. Rollins was reluctant but eventually agreed that Isaac could leave the following morning, provided he traveled by wagon rather than horseback and returned to bed rest immediately upon reaching their destination. Marcus arranged to purchase a small wagon and team, while Lydia stayed at Isaac's side, helping him take small sips of water and spoonfuls of broth to build his strength. That evening, as Marcus went to secure the final preparations for their journey, Lydia and Isaac found themselves alone for the first time since his departure from the ranch. You shouldn't have come, Isaac said, though there was no reproach in his tone. It was a risk. I had to. Lydia adjusted the thin blanket covering him. I couldn't bear not knowing if you were all right. Isaac caught her hand, holding it against his chest. I failed, Lydia. I couldn't stop them. You're alive. That's what matters. Is it? Bitterness crept into his voice. They're still out there. Still a threat to you and your uncle. And now I'm too weak to protect either of you. You don't have to do everything alone, Lydia said gently. Marcus has already sent word to the territorial marshal, and my uncle will have received your letter by now. It's not enough. Isaac's grip on her hand tightened. The Scanlons won't stop until they've completed what they started. And neither will I. Lydia studied his face, the determination in his eyes despite the pallor of his skin, the set of his jaw that spoke of a resolve undiminished by his injuries. She had thought, hoped perhaps, that his brush with death might have tempered his need for vengeance. But it seemed to have only strengthened it. There are other ways to fight, she said finally. Ways that don't require you to face them alone with a gun. Such as the law, evidence. Your testimony about their connection to Grant could be enough to bring in the federal marshals. Isaac's laugh was hollow. The law moves too slowly, Lydia, and corrupt men like Grant know how to manipulate it. Then we fight them together, she insisted. You, me, Marcus, the marshals. Anyone who stands for justice over vengeance. Something in her words seemed to reach him. The tension in his face eased slightly. Together, he repeated, as if testing the concept. I've been alone in this for so long. I'm not sure I remember how to be part of a we. Then I'll remind you, Lydia said softly, leaning forward to press a gentle kiss to his forehead. Starting now. They departed Dryden at first light. Isaac settled as comfortably as possible in the back of the wagon on a mattress of blankets. Lydia rode beside him, while Marcus handled the team. Progress was slow, each bump in the trail causing Isaac to clench his jaw against the pain, though he never complained. By midday, they had covered less than half the distance they would have made on horseback. Marcus suggested stopping to rest the horses and allow Isaac to sleep, finding a spot beneath a cluster of cottonwoods near a small creek. As Lydia helped Isaac drink from a canteen, movement on the ridge above caught her eye. 3 riders, silhouetted against the sky, watching them. Marcus, she called, trying to keep her voice steady. We have company. Marcus turned, following her gaze. His hand moved casually to the rifle beside him. Get Isaac back in the wagon, he said quietly. And stay down. Who is it? Isaac asked, struggling to sit up. Trouble, Marcus replied grimly. The riders began descending the ridge, moving unhurriedly, confidently. As they drew closer, Lydia could make out their features. 3 men, all bearing a family resemblance. The Scanlons. "Well now, what have we here?" called the leader, a man with a thick mustache and cold eyes. "Seems our friend Xavier is taking a little trip." Marcus stood, rifle held loosely but ready. "This doesn't have to get ugly, Scanlon. We're just passing through." "Is that so?" The leader smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Thing is, we have unfinished business with Xavier. And I believe that's Lydia Faraday with him. Two birds, one stone." Isaac reached for his revolver, but Lydia stopped him. "You can barely sit up," she whispered. "You'll only get yourself killed. Better than watching them kill you," he replied through gritted teeth. The standoff stretched, tension building with each passing second. Then, unexpectedly, the sound of multiple horses approaching from the direction they'd come broke the silence. All heads turned to see a group of 6 riders coming fast, not outlaws, but lawmen, led by a man with a silver star on his chest. The U.S. Marshal. The Scanlons hesitated, clearly calculating their odds. "This ain't over," the leader growled before wheeling his horse around. The 3 outlaws spurred their mounts up the opposite side of the ridge, disappearing from view just as the marshals arrived. Mitchell, the lead marshal, a weathered man in his 50s, reined in beside the wagon. "Got your message. Seems we arrived just in time." "Marshal Jenkins." Marcus lowered his rifle, relief evident in his voice. "Never been happier to see a lawman in my life." The marshals quickly organized a pursuit party, 4 of them continuing after the Scanlons while Jenkins and his deputy remained with the wagon. Isaac, despite his condition, insisted on telling Jenkins everything he knew about the Scanlons' connection to Nathan Grant and possibly Sheriff Burke in Clifton. "We've suspected Grant for some time," Jenkins confirmed. "Never had enough evidence to move on him, though. Your testimony could change that." "You'll get it," Isaac promised. "Once I see Lydia safely to her uncle." Jenkins shook his head. "Judge Faraday is already under protection. After receiving your letter, he contacted us directly. He's been moved to a secure location in Prescott." Relief washed over Lydia. "He's safe, as houses, and anxious to see you once this business is concluded." Jenkins mounted his horse. "We'll escort you back to Mitchell's ranch. My men will either catch the Scanlons or drive them far from here. Either way, you'll be safer there than on the trail." The journey back to the Circle M took another full day, with frequent stops to allow Isaac to rest. The marshal and his deputy proved welcome additions, their presence discouraging any further attempts by the Scanlons to approach the group. Upon reaching the ranch, Sarah immediately took charge of Isaac's care, installing him in the bedroom nearest the kitchen where she could keep a close eye on him. Lydia divided her time between helping Sarah and sitting with Isaac, whose strength was returning slowly but steadily. On the 5th day after their return, Marshal Jenkins rode in with news. "We got them," he announced as soon as he dismounted. "All 3 Scanlons, cornered in a box canyon near the territorial line." "Dead or alive?" Isaac asked from his seat on the porch, where he'd been permitted to sit for short periods. "Alive for now. They'll stand trial in Prescott next month." Jenkins removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow. "And we arrested Grant yesterday. Found ledgers in his office detailing payments to the Scanlons for various services. Burke too, though he's claiming ignorance." "Justice through the law," Lydia said softly, glancing at Isaac. "So it seems," he agreed, though his expression remained troubled. Later, when they were alone on the porch watching the sunset, Lydia broached the subject that had been weighing on her mind. "Are you disappointed that you weren't the one to end it?" Isaac was silent for a long moment, considering the question. "Part of me is," he finally admitted. "For 5 years, I've lived for the moment when I'd face them with a gun in my hand. Having that taken away, it leaves a void. And the other part? The other part is relieved." He reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Relieved that it's over. Relieved that I'm alive to see it happen. Relieved that I can finally think about a future instead of being chained to the past." "What does that future look like?" Lydia asked, her heart beating faster. Isaac turned to her, his eyes serious. "I'm not sure yet, but I know I want you in it, if you'll have me. Even though we've known each other such a short time, time isn't always the best measure." He squeezed her hand. "I've known men for years who I wouldn't trust with $1, and others I'd trust with my life after a single day. What matters is what we've been through together, and what I feel when I'm with you." "And what is that?" Lydia asked softly, like I found my way home after being lost for a very long time. Isaac's voice was low, intense. Like the world makes sense again. Lydia felt tears prick her eyes. I feel the same way. The kiss they shared was tender, full of promise and healing. When they parted, Isaac kept her close, his good arm around her shoulders as they watched the last light fade from the sky. Your uncle will want to see you, he said after a while. Once the marshals confirm it's safe. Yes. Lydia rested her head against his shoulder. But I'd like you to come with me when I go to Prescott. Are you sure? He might have other plans for you. Lydia smiled. I'm a grown woman, Isaac. My uncle can advise me, but my decisions are my own. And I've decided that whatever comes next, I want to face it with you. 2 weeks later, declared well enough to travel by Sarah, who had appointed herself his primary nurse and medical authority, Isaac accompanied Lydia to Prescott. Judge William Faraday, a dignified man in his 60s with kind eyes that reminded Lydia of her father, welcomed them warmly to his substantial home on the outskirts of town. My dear niece, he said, embracing Lydia, I've been so worried. And Mr. Xavier, I owe you a debt I can never repay for protecting Lydia. No debt, Your Honor, Isaac replied, shaking the judge's hand. It was my privilege. The trial of the Scanlon brothers and their associates was the talk of the territory, with newspapers from as far as San Francisco sending reporters to cover the proceedings. Lydia and Isaac both testified, recounting their experiences with clarity and courage. Nathan Grant, facing overwhelming evidence of his corruption, turned state's witness, providing even more details of the Scanlons' crimes across multiple territories. In the end, justice was swift and decisive. The Scanlon brothers were sentenced to hang for multiple counts of murder, while Grant received 20 years in a federal prison. Sheriff Burke, proven to have been merely negligent rather than actively corrupt, was removed from office but spared imprisonment. After the trial, Lydia and Isaac stood on the steps of the courthouse, a weight lifted from both their shoulders. It's really over, she said, still somewhat disbelieving. They can never hurt anyone again. No, they can't. Isaac took her hand. So now we decide what comes next. Judge Faraday had offered Lydia a permanent home with him in Prescott, a generous proposition that would provide her with stability and comfort. But as she looked at Isaac, she knew her heart lay elsewhere. My uncle says there's a small property for sale not far from the Circle M, she said. 200 acres, with a modest house and good water. Isaac raised an eyebrow. Is that so? He offered to help me purchase it, as an early inheritance. Lydia squeezed his hand. It would be a good place to start a ranch. Though I'd need someone who knows about cattle and horses to make it work. A slow smile spread across Isaac's face. Someone like me, perhaps? Exactly like you, she confirmed, her own smile matching his. If you're interested in a partnership. Isaac drew her closer, mindful of the public setting but unable to resist. I'm thinking of something more permanent than a business partnership, Lydia Faraday. Are you now? She looked up at him, her heart in her eyes. I might be amenable to such an arrangement, under the right conditions. Such as you promising to remember that surviving makes us both brave, and that we're stronger together than apart. Isaac's expression softened. That's a promise I intend to keep. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Lydia Faraday became Lydia Xavier in a simple ceremony at the newly established Xavier Ranch. Judge Faraday officiated, with Marcus and Sarah Mitchell standing as witnesses. The small house had been expanded and improved, with plans for further additions as the ranch grew. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sun set over land that was now theirs, Isaac pulled Lydia close. Happy? He asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Incredibly. She leaned into him. Though I still think about them, sometimes the people from the stagecoach who didn't survive. That's natural. We honor them by living well, by making something good come from what happened. Lydia nodded, understanding the wisdom in his words. And we've certainly done that. The ranch was already thriving, with a small herd of cattle and several promising colts that Isaac was training with his gentle touch. Lydia had discovered a talent for business, keeping the books with precision and negotiating fair prices with buyers. Together, they were building something neither could have achieved alone. Do you ever think about how we met? Lydia asked. How different our lives would be if the Scanlons had never attacked that stage. I try not to dwell on what-ifs, Isaac replied. But I do believe that some things are meant to be, even if they come from terrible beginnings. Like us. Exactly like us. He tilted her face up to his. I would have found you somehow, Lydia Xavier. Of that, I'm certain. As their lips met in a kiss that still held all the wonder of their first, Lydia knew he was right. From the ashes of tragedy, they had forged something beautiful and enduring, a love strong enough to heal past wounds and brave enough to face whatever the future might bring. And in the years that followed, as their family grew to include 2 sons and a daughter, and their ranch became one of the most respected in the territory, Lydia never forgot the truth that had saved them both. Surviving doesn't make you guilty. It makes you brave.